Welcome, one and all, to episode 40 of the NFL Draft Breakdown Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Cox. With me tonight, my co-host, Justin Higdon. Justin, just the two of us tonight. We're previewing the Big 12. That's how little anybody cares about the Big 12. No, I'm kidding. Everybody's excited about the Big 12 this year. Good teams, really interesting quarterback prospects. I'm not sure if they are necessarily pro quarterback prospects, but there are really interesting quarterback prospects in the Big 12. How are you doing, Justin?
Excellent as always. Honestly, I enjoy watching the Big 12, but I hate scouting the Big 12. It's an awful defensive conference, and the offenses do not translate to pro style. It's just very difficult to get a grasp on. But we do, there are some players like Corey Coleman last year who ends up going 15th overall, who we kind of said was a day two guy, and things are looking up for him. So, I mean, there are exceptions. There are guys who kind of rise above the Big 12 style of play, but all in all, it's just to me, it's a very frustrating conference to deal with. And it's not my favorite, but there are some guys that we should talk about, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun night. Shorter show, and we got a cool announcement at the end, kind of a what to look forward to. So we'll go over that at the end of the show. But let's get started. The Big 12, and I talked about it earlier, the quarterbacks. Let's start with the guy that I don't even know what's going on at the school in Seth Russell. One, Baylor quarterbacks toss up whether or not they're actually good. I guess we'll see what RG3 does this year in Cleveland for you guys. But, I mean, Bryce Petty, there's talk he may not make the New York Jets. What is Seth Russell? Is he a prospect? And how much does what's going on at Baylor hurt Bryce Petty, the prospect?
I don't.
Sorry, Seth Russell.
Right, Seth Russell. Bryce Petty seems like he's on his way to getting cut for the Jets. RG3 obviously is going to have a career resurrection in Cleveland under Hugh Jackson, so I'm not worried about RG3. Seth Russell, I mean, how much is this coaching change going to affect Baylor's offense? They still have Art Briles' son on the staff. They retain a lot of assistants. I really don't think that it's going to impact the way they play the game. I think other teams may be able to steal a couple games that they wouldn't have normally been able to steal because there's some turmoil within the program. But Seth Russell, he's a really unique athlete. He's one of these freak guys who 6'3", 220. He runs a 4.5. He jumps 40 inches on the vert and over 10 feet on the broad jump, which is crazy for a quarterback. But we don't know much about him as a starting quarterback. He's only had 8 college starts, and we know what Baylor's system is. It's a lot of deep passes, but there's so much predetermined, and the receivers are not running complex routes. We always hear about how the receivers have to learn route trees and things like that. A guy like Corey Coleman is a phenomenal athlete, so he seems to be picking things up very quickly. But we've seen other guys like Antoine Goodley go undrafted. Jay Lee went undrafted. So Baylor's offense is very much, to me, a product of the coaching staff. If you go down to the running backs, like a Lake Seastrunk, same kind of deal as with the receivers. So I'm not sure how good of a prospect Seth Russell is. He's a guy who's very intriguing because he's got the size. He's, as I said, a freak athlete, and he's 22 years old. So he's not past that threshold that we talk about 24-year-old rookie quarterbacks kind of being the backup quarterback range. But Seth Russell has potential. He did have a bad neck injury last year, so we don't really know too much about it. This guy's a mystery man, and I think he will put up good numbers, but I just think he's probably going to be in that Bryce Petty range of drafting, maybe even later, because I think Petty was actually more accurate than what I've seen out of Seth Russell.
On the other side, we have, maybe the most heralded college quarterback outside of Deshaun Watson returning this year in Baker Mayfield. First off, I love Baker Mayfield as a college football player. Absolutely electric to watch. Probably the closest thing to Johnny Manziel we're going to get, in a while. Obviously, he's not the Johnny Manziel of off the field, at least right now. I just don't see anything. I shouldn't say anything. I just don't see a player that translates to the NFL. Do you? To be brief, I kind of equate Mayfield to what we talked about when we talked about J.T. Barrett a couple weeks ago.
Mayfield is a very good college quarterback. I expect him to be a 4-year starting college quarterback. So I expect him to be back next year. The ruling went in his favor. He regained that year of eligibility that he originally lost from transferring within the Big 12. They had a ruling, and they decided that he's actually a redshirt junior now. So he can come back next year, and he doesn't have the size that NFL teams drool over. He's 6'1", 210. I think that's probably being generous.
Very generous.
He was – yeah, and he transfers from Texas Tech. We've talked about transfer quarterbacks. In Mayfield's case, as we talked about when we talked about Davis Webb going to Cal, these are guys that get beat out. And there's a reason why they get beat out. But to go to a program like Oklahoma and become the starter and then put up Heisman Trophy caliber numbers like Mayfield did, you can't sneeze at that. But I don't know that he's a good enough prospect for him to come out after this year. I'm expecting him to be back in college next year.
I think he is a great college quarterback. I'm not confident he is a good NFL prospect. And so,
well, I really liked Johnny Manziel. Off the field problems be damned, but I don't think Baker Mayfield is that type of player. I don't think he's quite at Johnny Manziel's level. Like, I was very high on Manziel. I wouldn't be as high on Manziel knowing what I know now, although I still thought Manziel, if he could have got over those off the field hurdles, could have been a good quarterback, but I don't think Mayfield's on that level. I think he's kind of a tier below that, and maybe more like a Chase Daniel type, where he could end up being a backup for a long time and a well-paid backup and well-respected. But I just don't see, like, starting quarterback potential, and that's why I see him as that guy who's going to come back next year and then be like a late-round pick.
Yeah, I don't, like I said, I'm not huge on him. I think he's a nice player, but then we get to maybe the two of the quote-unquote sleeper prospects in this year's draft at quarterback, and not the Carson Wentz sleeper, but more in the Paxton Lynch mold of sleeper, and that's let's start with Patrick Mahomes out of Texas Tech.
Yeah,
Patrick Junior this year, right?
Right. Patrick Mahomes, his dad played baseball. He was a Major League Baseball pitcher, relief pitcher. I think he was a failed starter, became a relief pitcher for the Minnesota Twins. So Mahomes actually had some hype. Or if you were following summer scouting Twitter early in the summer, Patrick Mahomes was actually getting some kind of hype. And I don't know that's unwarranted necessarily. I think he's kind of unproven. And we're always skeptical of those air raid quarterbacks.
Yes.
Even when it came to Jared Goff. I think Jared Goff was a better prospect than Patrick Mahomes. But we're talking Mahomes was a sophomore, and he was the guy who actually beat out Davis Webb, who transferred to Cal and is replacing Goff. So there's kind of a weird 6 degrees of separation kind of thing going on there. Mahomes put up huge numbers last year. He can run. He can throw.
He's a good tools guy. I think he is a candidate to come out early. So this is a player, I wouldn't even call him a sleeper. I think a lot of people are really in tune on Patrick Mahomes and hoping that he is a guy who takes a leap and puts himself into that first-round conversation. I've watched a little bit of him. It's so hard to gauge on these offenses, but I think he's a guy who definitely extends the play, sometimes to his own detriment. But he's got some ability, and people love guys that have professional athlete pedigree. His dad being a professional athlete, they're going to say he knows how to act like a pro. He's going to have all those intangible type things that people are going to talk about. I don't know if that really holds any water. We don't know unless we talk to the kid, but it's interesting. He's a very interesting prospect.
From there, maybe a guy I like too much, so we'll see. Mason Rudolph, Oklahoma State. You kind of hit on it. If a guy can't, win a quarterback position, is he really that good? Mason Rudolph won a quarterback position, kind of. What do you think? I mean, is he a legit NFL prospect? He's going to have the size and arm that the NFL loves. I like his ability. He is only a junior, so he doesn't have to come out this year. But could he be that Paxton Lynch this year?
I think he can be. I've done a little preliminary work on him. One of the things that you notice right off the bat with Rudolph is, besides his size, he's a guy who takes a lot of shots downfield and completes a lot of passes downfield. So anybody who's been listening to this show for the past year knows that I really respected that out of Connor Cook. And I think Rudolph kind of hits those benchmarks for me. He's not quite to the point where Cook was last year, but of course he's really 2 years behind where Cook was as a redshirt senior. So Rudolph is a player who really piques my interest. The numbers that he put up, we've referenced the show where we talked to Blake Murphy, who did some scouting internship for the Arizona Rattlers, the Arena Football League, and he told us that completion percentage and yards per attempt and touchdown to interception ratio, those are things that pro scouts and pro personnel people really look at. Rudolph only falls short in the touchdown to interception ratio department. And this is a big guy, takes a lot of shots, completes passes for a good amount of yards per attempt, converts third downs at a pretty high rate, considering he was only a sophomore last year. So I think he has the potential to make that leap. If we look at where Paxton Lynch was this time last year, I like that comparison to the point where Rudolph could become a late first-round type.
There you have it. Justin Higdon calling the shot. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I want to clarify, though.
I'm just kidding.
He needs to play well this year. And the thing that Rudolph has working for him is he's playing in a major conference. He's playing in Power 5, and Lynch wasn't. So Lynch was able to parlay playing for Memphis into that. And Rudolph has some good receivers to work with, some really interesting receivers that we're going to talk about in a few.
Before we get there, let's go to running backs. First one, Barry Sanders Jr. Transferred. What's your opinion on him?
Right, Barry J. Sanders. He doesn't like to be called junior. He is, of course, the son of the Hall of Fame, the great Hall of Fame running back, Barry Sanders. But he's a graduate transfer from Stanford, where Barry J. Sanders was a 4-star recruit. So there was much hype about this guy, but he didn't really ever take off at Stanford. And, of course, we know that Christian McCaffrey, the son of another former NFL player, was the, I think, Heisman runner-up last year, right? So Barry J. takes a back seat. He's still a decent player, but he doesn't have great size. He's kind of a scat back type, under 200 pounds. So I think that teams would like to see some more receiving out of him. Hopefully Oklahoma State can get him involved in the passing game, because he only is, for a guy who's 198 pounds. He only has 12 catches. And you would expect this guy to maybe return kicks, and he hasn't done that really either. So I'm interested to see what his role is with Oklahoma State, because he was just kind of a backup, third down type back. Just a guy who spelled Christian McCaffrey, but McCaffrey was just so ball dominant. He did everything for Stanford. It's understandable to see why Barry J would transfer, because he wasn't going to touch the ball this year.
From there, Derek Green. What are your thoughts on Green there?
I like talking about these graduate transfer guys. I wrote an article about graduate transfer students for Revenge of the Birds last week. So if you haven't already, please check that out. But Derek Green was a 5-star recruit who went to Michigan. Michigan beat out a bunch of other big schools for this guy. He was the top running back in his class in 2013, according to Rivals. And he had a really kind of slow freshman year, but then as sophomore, he started to kind of take off, and then he broke his collarbone. And he came back last year, but he was kind of buried by Jim Harbaugh. I don't know if it was a work ethic thing, or I think some reports were that he was out of shape. He has graduated. He's transferred to TCU. They have an opening because Aaron Green graduated and went to the NFL. And so there's an opportunity for this guy. He's in a wide-open spread offense, and he's a big back, about 235 pounds. It's always interesting for me to see where these graduate transfers go and to see if they can rebuild that draft stock. So Derek Green's a guy I've been following for his whole career because he was at Michigan, and now I'm just kind of interested to see if he can salvage it.
And it's one of those, like you said, kind of stories that you want to follow, because a guy got into you hate saying bad situation, but Michigan was not at a good spot when he went there. That wasn't a good time to be a Michigan Wolverine. And then, by the time Jim Harbaugh got there, it was almost like it was too late. Like he couldn't. They had already kind of moved on from what Derek Green could have been. So it's one of those unfortunate, disappointing things, but we'll see, what he makes of everything, this opportunity.
You're exactly right, because he comes in, Harbaugh comes in, and Green's coming off that collarbone injury, and Harbaugh is trying to recruit other running backs. He actually stole a guy named Karan Higdon from Iowa at that point, who is another small type of back. And then Harbaugh tended to favor Davion Smith and a couple other guys in the rotation ahead of Derek Green. So I don't know if Green was kind of being punished for being hurt, or if he just came back slowly from that injury. But he wasn't a Harbaugh recruit, and Harbaugh didn't seem to care about him as far as putting him in the rotation. And certainly he didn't seize any opportunity that he had. So this is on him. But I like the fact – I like when a guy tries to go someplace and open up an opportunity for himself. And he's still a young guy. He actually it would have been a true senior. So he graduated in a very quick fashion from a tough school. So he has that going for him.
Shock Linwood, again, another Baylor player. First off, he's a smaller back at 5'9", 200 pounds. Not, and that's not small by any means, but in today's NFL, for whatever reason, all of a sudden that's a small back. Baylor offense, who was the Lachey?
Lake Seastrunk, yeah.
Lake Seastrunk. Everybody thought he was going to be good, and he wasn't. Is Linwood just another product of that up-tempo, talented Baylor's offense, or does he have some ability to make it at the next level?
Yes, yes, he is a product of that offense. I'm not a fan of Shock Linwood. He's going to be a 24-year-old rookie when he comes out, and he's had his moments, but one of the things I really like the guy coming out of Baylor a few years back when Robert Griffin III was there. His name was Terrence Ganaway. And after Ganaway left and just really was drafted late by the Jets and really didn't do anything, when I saw Seastrunk play, I started to realize that these guys don't really have the vision that you look for in pro running backs. There's just wide open lanes. And Seastrunk was much more, I think, athletically gifted than what you see out of Shock Linwood. So it's not like this guy has no chance of playing in the pros, but he's not a starting caliber running back. He's a late round guy. And the evidence is he's a fifth-year senior at running back. If guys that really take off their stock, they would be out of school after their third year. And Shock Linwood, I think, had an opportunity as a redshirt sophomore. He could have declared, and I just don't think that he's that kind of talent. I think people were telling him, like, no, you're a late-round guy, and I don't think he's done anything to change that.
I'm going to butcher his first name. Is it Samaje?
Samaje Perine.
Samaje, I'm going to call him Perine because I'm not going to say Perine every time because I won't remember. Samaje Perine. We're getting some, like, glowing reviews from internet draft Twitter personnels. I like Perine or Perine. I don't know if I like him that much. What are your thoughts?
Well, he burst onto the scene because Melvin Gordon set the single game rushing record, the single game FBS rushing record a couple of years ago. And then, like, it was the next weekend that Perine, as a true freshman, broke his record. He ran for 427 yards. He was Big 12 Freshman of the Year on offense. He was first team All Big 12 the last 2 years. I like this kid. He's really big, and he averages over 6 yards a carry. He's scoring a ton of touchdowns. He's involved in the receiving game. Perine is a player, when everybody – seemed like at the beginning of the summer, everyone was talking about Fournette, and then everyone soured on Fournette, and they started talking about these guys like Darius Geis and guys who haven't – Nick Chubb, who's coming back from an injury, guys who haven't really shown that they are back or that they can handle a full workload. And Perine was getting overlooked at that time. Now Perine seems to be gaining steam, and I like it. I think he's a good player. I really think that he's going to be part of this hyped 2017 running back class. I don't know that he's going to be a first-round pick because he's big. I think some people will sour on him because he's over 230 pounds. But when we talked to Eric Stoner a few weeks ago, when we reviewed the 2013 draft, and he talked about big backs with balance, guys like LeGarrette Blount, guys like Eddie Lacy who've had success in the NFL. Perine's going to fit into that mold, and I think he's probably going to end up being a better athlete and testing better than those guys. So that's going to help his stock. I think he's going to be a day 2 pick, and I think he will declare after this year.
And I've seen comps to Michael Turner. Is he as fast? Because Turner ran like a 4.46 or something, didn't he?
Yeah, Turner was. Yeah, he was nicknamed the Burner coming out of Northern Illinois. But Perine was a member of Bruce Feldman's freak list last year, I think, and maybe even the year before. And I saw an article where Bruce Feldman did his freak list this year. I don't think he included Perine. And then he did a follow-up to that article where I think he said he should have included him. So he hasn't lost track of him. This is a player who is considered an athletic marvel, and he's definitely putting up the production, even if it isn't a spread offense. I like his build and his tools, and everything about this guy puts him on my radar for a potential sneak into the first round. But I ultimately think he's going to go into that Derrick Henry range.
Wide receivers in the Big 12. The first one I want to talk about is a Baylor wide receiver, KD Cannon. I've seen some people that like really, really like him. I'm not necessarily there. I don't dislike him either. I think he's a nice player. But, I mean, he's not Corey Coleman. I'm not even sure if he's Kendall Wright. Those guys were both first-round picks. Is he more, in the Terrence Williams mold as in terms of draft range and player archetype?
I think you said it. He's not Corey Coleman, and we were kind of critical of Coleman at times last year because of the offense that he's coming out of. We talked about Baylor's offense, and Coleman is having a really good camp for Cleveland. He's being coached up, and it's really taking to him. Like, we might have been too low on him. I don't think Cannon is as good as Corey Coleman, but he is a burner. He's kind of undersized, though. Like, he doesn't have that. Kendall Wright and Coleman were both close to 200 pounds, and Cannon's listed at 180. He's a track athlete, but Coleman ran 4.39 or 4.37. Cannon is faster than Kendall Wright, and he's going to jump out of the gym. But he's also coming off of arthroscopic knee surgery. So we don't know how – he just had that surgery this past month in July. We don't know how he's going to come back. He even flirted with transferring. He's a junior. He flirted with transferring after all the hubbub, and he decided to stick it out. That makes me think he's going to declare after this year, because if he was going to transfer, he would have sit out a year. I think he's just going to play through it. He's going to put up numbers. He's a good player. I think he'll ultimately be a day 2 pick.
If anybody's heading into the half, the Calgary Stampeders lead the Saskatchewan Roughriders 16-12. So it's a real barn burner.
Is Brett Smith or Chris Bonner or Vernon Adams in this game?
I've never heard of any of the people that are playing, but I will say this. Ben Natan is the kicker for the Saskatchewan Roughriders at 5'8", 125 pounds, and a redhead. So I'm glad Ben Natan overcame his physical limitations to become a CFL kicker. So congratulations, Ben Natan. Geno Lewis, transfer from Penn State. He looked pretty okay in 2014, and then didn't take that next step in 2015. I think it was like 55 and 750, right around there in 2014. And his career ended up with 90 and 11, almost 1,200 yards. What do we make of Geno Lewis? Was that just a byproduct of the Penn State talent, coaching, quarterback, all of that? Like, what do we make of Geno Lewis?
It's kind of all of that, but the real takeaway for me is that Chris Godwin, who we talked about a couple weeks ago when we previewed the Big Ten, is a really good player. And Chris Godwin kind of took that role from him. And they had the other receiver, Deshaun Hamilton, who was the leading receiver of the year that Geno Lewis finished second in all those categories. But Chris Godwin took over. Geno Lewis became kind of an afterthought, but he still had a couple plays last year where he got the ball deep, but there just wasn't a lot of targets to go around. And so when those other two guys were getting the targets, Lewis fell to a distant third. He ends up being a graduate transfer where he's going to Oklahoma, where he's going to see an increase in targets. So I think Geno Lewis has a chance to revive his stock to the point where he becomes a draftable player. Nobody's going to draft a receiver from a major conference who had 17 catches in a full season like Lewis did last year, but he's going to get back to that area where he was 2 years ago, where he's catching about 50 or so passes. He's going to be in that category this year. I think it's a smart move for him to transfer, and he certainly has a quarterback who's going to throw for a higher volume, I think, or at least a higher accuracy.
The last wide receiver is another one I'm interested in because I like I said, I'm going to pick Oklahoma State as kind of the team I watch this year. I don't have a college football team per se. I'm sure while I'm living in Chicago with Justin, I'll just adopt Ohio State that year. But
that's right.
James Washington out of Oklahoma State. What do you make of James?
Washington and I think Juwan Seals is the other guy. This is why I'm high on Rudolph, because he's got 2 quality targets to throw to, and Washington is one of those players that the fantasy football guys are going to be really high on, because he just posted big numbers last year. Let me find James Washington real quick, because I just lost him. Apologies, but he's a 6 foot, 205-pound guy. So he's right. He looks just like this Michael Crabtree type of receiver that we've seen come out of Oklahoma State before. And then last year he catches 53 passes, but he averaged over 20 yards a catch as a true sophomore. So that kind of production, the fantasy guys are going to drool over that. There are people in the fantasy community, they talk about market share, and they talk about breakout age, and James Washington really fits into that mold. And he wasn't a super high recruit, but he was a decent recruit, 3-star recruit, 6 feet, over 200 pounds, and I think he's just going to get bigger and better. I really am excited for what Rudolph's going to do, where he's got Washington and Seals on as kind of his bookends, and they have a tight end that is going to pick up his production a little bit. So I think this is going to be a high-power offense, and I think Oklahoma State's going to have a pretty good year this year.
Tight ends, I didn't have any down. Did you? Did I have a tight end down? No, I don't think there's any tight ends that play in the Big 12. They all transfer.
No, the only tight end that I have down is the guy I mentioned from Oklahoma State. That's Blake Jarwin, and he's a redshirt senior. He hasn't been ultra productive, but he had 17 catches last year, and I think he's going to be one of the highest rated. He's got that. He's 6'5", 250. So people are going to be intrigued by him. I'm not sure if he's a draftable guy yet, but he's going to be involved in their offense.
The offensive line talent in the Big 12 is something. I don't know what I would necessarily call it. Do you want to talk about Orlando Brown? What is he? A redshirt junior?
He's a redshirt sophomore. His father, Orlando Brown Sr., played NFL for Cleveland and Baltimore, and he passed away in 2011. Orlando Brown, to me, he's best remembered for getting hit in the eye with a penalty flag. I think it was the year the Browns came back to NFL in '99. It was around that time. His son, Orlando Brown Jr.,
he's a small kid. I mean, he's only 6'8", 340 pounds.
He's listed at 357, and in high school he was listed as much as 420. So this is a player who definitely struggles with weight, but he started all 13 games at left tackle for Oklahoma. Redshirt sophomore, NFL pedigree. Got to keep an eye on him. I don't know if he's going to be a guy who declares. Definitely teams are going to be really concerned about that weight. They're going to want to keep it down. And I don't think an NFL left tackle can play at over 360 pounds.
Then you and I have on our list a bunch of interior offensive linemen. That's kind of the situation in the Big 12 with tackles right now. Tyler Orlovsky, he's West Virginia, right? West Virginia's center.
Yeah, he's pretty well regarded.
And he's a big dude. Wasn't he like 6'4"?
He's a tall guy. He's kind of tall and slim for an offensive.
Like 297, I read. Right. And so this is the thing with all, like, I have Baylor center on here, and he has West Virginia center. Like, I don't know what to make of these centers in these spread offenses, because I don't know what line calls they're having to make and things of that nature. And for centers, you look at Nick Martin, you look at Ryan Kelly, they made a lot of calls. How much are these guys making? But Orlovsky is really highly thought of.
Yeah, I think who was the kid for Kansas State a couple of years ago that we really liked? And he had BJ Finney. He ends up going undrafted, but he's stuck around. I think he's still with Pittsburgh. I know that for a time they liked him, at least last year in camp. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't know. This is why the Big 12 is so frustrating to me, because we have guys on the offensive line where, like, a guy like Spencer Drango was, I think, a 3-time first-team All Big 12, 2-time Big 12 Offensive Lineman of the Year, and we didn't really like him. And he ends up going in the 5th round. And he's obviously a smart guy and a quick study, because he's picking things up for Cleveland pretty quickly. But it's just tough to evaluate guys like that. And Finney was a guy that I really liked, but he ended up testing really, really poorly. Cody Whitehair was the guy that we both liked. He tested poorly, and he was playing left tackle. They're kicking him inside as a pro. It's so tough to evaluate these Big 12 offensive lines. The way they play, I think what I'm going to look for is their toughness, and just, do they scrap? Are they nasty? Do they play through the whistle? Can they get big enough? I've talked to people who think 6'4" is kind of on the borderline of too tall for a center. I think it is. I kind of think guys that are taller than that 6'5", 6'6", like a Graham Glasgow from Michigan last year, are going to get booted out to guard or tackle. So it's interesting to watch. I don't really know what to make of these guys. Brown is the prototypical size for like a right tackle, but otherwise we're kind of in no man's land with these offensive linemen for the Big 12, at least where I sit right now.
Yeah, and Baylor center Kyle Fuller is kind of similar. I mean, he's listed at 6'4" and 310. Like, how many centers do you know that I mean, that's like a left tackle for a lot of, Big 12 spread teams. So it's interesting to see these big guys.
Plus, Baylor offensive linemen have just been going late or undrafted for the past several years. And there's no reason to think that Fuller is going to be a highly drafted kid. He was a second team All Big 12 last year, but I didn't particularly think he was better than Drango, and Drango was a 5th round guy. So I just don't really know. I'm not really enamored with any of these guys. Orlowski's probably the most interesting. And West Virginia, to their credit, and I expect Orlowski to kind of follow suit here, they've put out some offensive linemen that are at least really, really good athletes.
The last guy I had was Kent Perkins out of Texas. Finally, a guy that kind of projects as a guard tackle instead of a center guard, 6'5", 320. He'll be a senior this year, so he's coming out. Just kind of why I had him on this list. He's a guy, whenever you see tackle guard, you always assume right tackle guard at that point. Like, no matter what anybody else says, there's still right tackle, left tackle in the NFL. So,
how dare you?
I'm interested to see what Perkins does this year, because there isn't a ton of talent on the offensive line in the Big 12. So if he plays well as a senior, he could kind of vault himself towards that, day 2 status.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that guy.
It's a fake name. I was just seeing if you'd fall for it. Defensively, so this is, again, we're talking about the Big 12. We're not trying to be jerks. We're really, really not. We have 7 names on the defensive side of the ball combined.
Which I think is pretty fair, because defense is just hard to come by there. And there are going to be guys that emerge, I think. But we saw
this is a preseason watch list kind of preview. It's not really like, this guy's going to be outside of we can start with him, Charles Walker from Oklahoma. Like, how many guys are you willing to say could be a top 60 defensive pick from the Big 12?
Yeah, the other guy I have for the interior defensive line is Andre Pipkins, who is at Texas Tech this year. He's a transfer from Michigan, and Michigan, according to Andre Pipkins, Michigan coaches, including Jim Harbaugh, tried to get him to retire so they could get him out of the scholarship because he had torn his ACL in 2013 and there was some residual arthritis. But he said he was good to go in 2014, and I think he did play a little bit, but ultimately he decided to transfer. So this is a player who's a former five-star recruit, 6'3", 325. He has that profile to be a nose tackle, a guy who NFL teams are going to be interested in. But he kind of hasn't – we haven't seen him for a couple of years, and he's been hurt. So there's medical questions. With Walker, he missed the Orange Bowl with a concussion.
Yeah, and Walker's one of those, I hate using the word small for anybody that's 6'2" and 300 pounds, but he's one of those, newer type of interior defensive linemen that are not, necessarily the bigger guys. He put up good numbers last year. He had 6 sacks. That's really from an interior defense lineman in college. The question is, can he grow on that? And what does he do? That the defensive line from Oklahoma doesn't always get the freedom that us fans would like them to have. See Charles Tapper this year, who seems like he's playing really well for Dallas in camp. So, that's another thing to kind of keep in mind with Walker is maybe the scheme not, the best fit for him in Oklahoma.
Plus, he's a redshirt junior. He doesn't have to declare. Not only did he miss the Orange Bowl with a concussion, but he also had wrist surgery in the offseason. And then he missed 4 games in 2014 with a knee injury. So this is a guy who's consistently been dinged up. And we talk about injuries ad nauseum on this show. And I think there's all kinds of little mini red flags. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily like you just said. It's not necessarily that he's bad or anything like that. It's one of those things that you have to watch this now because all of a sudden you're talking about a guy who wins in a similar manner to like a Dominic Easley, and we're talking about nagging injuries, and then can he put on weight to become more of a run stop? There's questions.
There's a pattern here of health issues, and then there's the size to consider. So there's a lot of questions around this guy. I mean, he's a good player and definitely one that we're keeping an eye on, but we just don't even know. Is he going to be healthy or is he going to be big enough to really create that impact at the pro level?
Josh Caraway, kind of the lone edge guy that's interesting, and he's a redshirt senior. And so what makes him interesting is why, wasn't he a guy that came out last year? Like, how many edge defenders go back as redshirt seniors? I mean, Vic Beasley did, and he wasn't a redshirt senior, but he went back for his senior season, right, at Clemson.
I think he might have been a redshirt senior. I don't recall, but Caraway, yeah. Caraway, I have Jordan Willis down on my list too from Kansas State. He's a true senior, but neither one of those guys were top-end recruits. Both guys productive last year. 9 sacks for Caraway, 9.5 for Willis. They're both in that. They're built like Nate Orchard, we saw a couple years ago. That 6'4", 6'5", 250 range. But we don't – I didn't see that kind of explosiveness that you see from a first-round type of edge rusher. And like you said, if they are first-round type edge rushers, you see them declare before their senior season. So Orchard might be a decent comparison just because he wasn't explosive either. He was just kind of a grinder who worked and defended the run okay. I don't know how well these guys defend the run. Something worth watching coming into this year. Caraway I liked a little bit better than what I saw out of Willis, but I confess I was not really in tune with Kansas State's defense last year.
Linebackers, I have one, and I'm only interested in him because I like to see kind of these anti-archetype players and what happens to them. And in this case, it's Taylor Young out of Baylor. He's listed at 5'11". That's probably generous. He's a smaller linebacker in stature. He's kind of Arthur Brown build. They list him at 5'11", 235. He's the center of a defense that is okay by Big 12 standards. So that's,
they have athletes, at least. We know Baylor has athletes.
And he is he looks athletic. Let's say that. I just again, I don't know. I don't know about these short inside linebackers because that's all they can be, really.
Yeah, the guy that intrigues me at linebacker in Big 12 is Jordan Evans from Oklahoma. He was second team last year, all conference, but he's another guy with injury problems on Oklahoma's side. But 31 games in his career, he projects to be one of those smallish type middle linebackers. And I just don't know. He looks to me like a guy who can drop into coverage, and he seems like a rotational player. I would compare him as a prospect at this point to like a Christian Kirksey, although I don't necessarily know.
He's not as long as Kirksey, though, right?
At this stage, I'm not really sure. He's 6'2". He's listed at 6'2", 235. I think Kirksey's around that same size. I don't think he's as athletic as Kirksey, and the injury issues early on. But it's that kind of role, like a kind of rotational interior linebacker in a 3-4, where he can I guess he could play like a weak side linebacker, but he's going to be he projects as a backup to me, and the health concerns, as we noted with Walker, it's worth noting.
Safety, I have two big safeties. First guy's Ahmed Thomas out of Oklahoma. Big-time recruit, saw some time as a freshman, then, started basically the rest of his career. He's a senior this year. They list him at 6 foot and 215. He could be, that – I don't know. I don't think he's as athletic as like a Dayon Buchanan, but he could definitely be that thumper type that gets a look, earlier than they used to because he's able to play physical in the box and can cover a little bit. The other guy had 6'1", 205, Orion Stewart out of Baylor. Stewart is more intriguing to me because he looks a little more athletic than Thomas, but the big safeties, that's kind of the thing right now.
Yeah, Stewart's the guy I'm looking at. He has a 40-inch vertical, but he's had off the field stuff too. He was suspended last season for the first game of the year, and they missed 2 games for injury. So I think he's better than the last safety that we saw back there that was getting some hype, Ahmad Dixon. But Dixon was a player I really hated to watch. I really thought he was terrible, and I don't know that he's amounted to anything. But Stewart, to me, is a better player than that. He plays the ball better. But last year, kind of fell off. He just kind of fell off, and it was the suspension, the injury. I don't know what it was. I want him to have a bounce-back year, and he's a fifth-year senior. So we need to see something out of this guy. The other player that I'm looking at in the Big 12 at safety is Anthony Fish Smithson. And the reason I first heard about Fish Smithson is his brother, Shaky Smithson, was at his brother was at Utah. He was a kick return man and a wide receiver. And he actually adopted his younger brother, Fish, Anthony, when Anthony was 15. They came from a troubled background, and Anthony was originally committed to Navy, but then ended up through JUCO at Kansas. So he's got a great nickname. His brother has a great nickname. His brother had a cup of coffee in some training camps, I think notably with Green Bay. But Fish Smithson, this is probably the only Kansas player that we have on any list, and it's probably the only Kansas player I've even looked at for the last 3 years. Oh, besides Ben Heaney, who's I think wearing the green dot for Oakland this year. So congrats to Ben Heaney.
Anybody else that you want to cover in the Big 12?
Let me check. Let me check my cornerbacks. But, Big 12 defense is just not – we have Jordan Thomas at Oklahoma, another Thomas. He was suspended last year for a half against Akron, for an entire game against Tulsa. He was arrested in December for failing to appear in court for traffic. And then he was arrested in June for public intoxication and assault battery. So
is that
so
bad?
Many, yeah, I don't know. It's a guy who can't stay out of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, you can't grade off the field, though.
I'm going to go ahead and say, this guy's trouble, and he hasn't really done anything on the field to make me overlook that kind of trouble. But I just wanted to run down his rap sheet.
All right. Before we get out of here, guys, we got a pretty cool giveaway. Justin's been working his butt off getting this ready for you guys. So a cheap pop for us, if you don't mind. Give us a follow on iTunes or SoundCloud and give us a review and take a screenshot of it. And Justin has got a pretty cool giveaway that you can get if you send us a screenshot of those things. Go ahead, Justin.
So basically, guys, if for those of you who are longtime listeners, if you're already subscribing on iTunes, if you're already following on SoundCloud, take a screenshot, send it to us on Twitter or on email. My email is on my Twitter bio. I'm at AFC to NFC. Seth is at SCoxFB. Just take that screenshot. Let us know that you enjoy the show, that you're following, and send us that screenshot, and I will email you a PDF of a prospect preview heading into the year. It's over 350 players to watch heading into the year. We've got height, weight, stats, career stats, 2015 stats, injury history, off the field history, recruiting information, fun facts when applicable. It's going to be organized by conference, by team. It's going to be very easy to access so that when you're watching games this fall, you can reference the table of contents. If you're watching Michigan, Penn State, you'll be able to look up players from Michigan and Penn State, players to watch, players who are seniors or draft eligible juniors or redshirt sophomores. Again, over 350 guys I've got profiled. I've done the homework for you so that you can follow throughout the season, do your own homework. It's not analysis, it's not film breakdown, because these guys haven't finished their careers, but what it is, it's a starting point, it's a jumping off point heading into the year, and it's free if you subscribe. I'm going to make this available free to subscribers for the next couple of weeks, and it should be available starting either Monday, probably Wednesday at the latest. So if you're listening tomorrow, which is going to be Friday, it's going to be available probably on August 8th, I think Monday, or August 10th, Wednesday at the latest. Just send me that screenshot. I'll file it away. I'll email you a free copy of this. It's over 70 pages. So it's a great giveaway for our loyal subscribers. And for any new subscribers, just give us that screenshot and we'll send that your way.
And, we do appreciate all of you guys that listen. And, it does mean a lot to us. And we have a lot of fun with the show. That's why we do it. But we also enjoy the feedback from you guys, and the fact that we do get so much feedback and things of that nature. It means a lot to us that you listen to us ramble for an hour every week. So we appreciate that. That's it from us tonight. We'll be back next week. ACC, the last of the big four before we get to the semi-pro NFL teams in the SEC and break those down. It's going to be a fun, next couple of weeks. Then the whole crew will be back the first week of college football. Justice Mosqueda is going to join us, and we're going to run down who to watch, force players. We'll make fun of Justice a little bit, all of that good stuff, and then we'll get kicked off into the regular college football season. You can find my work. I run Revenge of the Birds now. Justin's helping out at Revenge of the Birds, doing a weekly NFL draft column. So make sure you check him out over there, and just get like Justin said, give us a follow and a review. Give us that screenshot, and we'll hook you up with this. I can tell you, Justin sent me a copy of it. He even sent me one. It is phenomenal, and it's one of the better pieces of information that you can get before the season starts. And so just hit that follow button and give us a rating, and we'll get that in your hands. So thanks for listening. As always, we'll be back next week. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night.